difficulties that we've experienced, which is, as they say, out of our control. But thank you very much for bearing with us. I am chairing the meeting this evening in the absence of our colleague, unusual chair, Councillor Millie Collins, who unfortunately is not well. So before I start, we have the usual housekeeping announcements that I need to remind everyone. So may I remind everyone present that the meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording is archived for future viewing. Could all participants please mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking? And if, as a participant, you wish to speak, can you please raise your hand in person if sat in the chamber, or if using the remote raise hand function. If a participant raises their hand via the remote function and is not subsequently invited to speak by myself acting as chair, please could you turn off your camera to indicate or place a message in the chat function. Okay. When invited to address by the chair, please could all participants ensure that their microphone and camera is on to ensure that they can be seen and heard when actively participating. If this is not possible for any reason, please bring this to the immediate attention of the chair or Democratic Services Officer as soon as possible. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues or to grab the attention of the chair, myself, or the Democratic Services Officer this evening. If any of you has any difficulty hearing or being heard when you are addressing the committee, then please let either myself or the Democratic Officer know. So, please could I welcome all committee and non-committee elected members, any cabinet members with us this evening, of course our officers, and also to anyone watching the live meeting broadcast. So we're going to be moving straight on to the agenda, and we're going to be beginning with item 1 and the apologies for absence. Do we have any, Mark?
Yes, we do, Chair. We've got apologies from Councillor Payne, Ball, and obviously the Chair, Councillor Collins, and apologies from Colette Island from the Citizens Advice Bureau.
Councillor Hennessy?
Yeah, apologies for David Dutch, Tenant Liaison Officer.
Thank you, Councillor Hennessy. Any other apologies? I don't see any other hands. No? Okay, so can we move on now onto the minutes of the previous meeting, Mark, which were the 15th of May 2024. And as usual, are members happy with the minutes? Are there any corrections that need to be noted? If not, can I have a proposer and seconder, please?
Happy to propose, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hanks, and I can see both Councillor Lloyd-Selby and Councillor Hennessy happy to second. So that's quite easy for me. That's the minutes of the meeting of the 15th of May, proposed and seconded. And now we move on to declarations of interest. Are there any for this evening's meeting? Again, I see no hands. Okay, so thank you for that. And so we move on to, you'll be for some reason I muted myself, colleagues. I'm terribly sorry. So if we move on now to the agenda item, which is agenda item 4, this is a reference from the Cabinet regarding the development of the corporate plan 2025 to 2030, an explanation of the panel performance assessment and the annual performance calendar of 2024-25, which was attached to Appendix A. And so to take us through this, Miles Punter will be presenting the report to members. Miles is here with us in the chamber. So Miles, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Let me know if you can all hear me. We're coming through okay? Yeah. As you say, Chair, this is a reference from Cabinet, and the report presents the annual performance calendar for the Council for 2024-25. We actually do this every year. and the calendar outlines the activities that will be subject to review by members over the year. In this case, there's two added aspects to the calendar. That is the development of the new corporate plan 2025-2030 and arrangements for undertaking a panel performance assessment. And I'll take you through these elements shortly. As this is a large report, if you're happy for me to do so, Chair, I'll break it down into 4 sections, pausing after each to allow questions from members or to consider any points of clarity. So the first section of the report is the corporate plan development 2025-2030, paragraphs 2.2 to 2.9. Members will be aware this is effectively the Council's business plan, and our current plan expires in 2025, so we need a new plan. So this is the proposal and details working on the plan. It is proposed that the Council's vision and values remain the same, as these are felt to still provide a strong foundation for development of the new plan. Just to remind members, I'm sure you don't need reminding, but our values are ambitious, proud, open and together. And these are embedded across the organisation now and remain relevant, as does our vision of strong communities with a bright future. So work has commenced to develop the new wellbeing objectives, which have taken into account a range of factors, including the results of a recent resident survey, Let's Talk, key data about the Vale of Glamorgan, regulatory recommendations, outcomes of the most recent annual self-assessment, and the Public Service Board's wellbeing plan and objectives. So the Council's strategic leadership team and Cabinet have already started to consider the new objectives in tandem with the development of the new reshaping programme, and the aim is for the new plan to be more outcome focused. So it is much clearer what we are seeking to achieve, and that this can be evidenced and measured accordingly. The new corporate plan is being developed alongside the budget and medium-term financial plan, and paragraph 2.8 of the report provides the indicative timetable for the development of the new plan and the panel performance assessment, PPA, which I will come on to shortly. This is factored into the development of the plan over the autumn period, with a plan being amended as a consequence of this assessment in December 2024. So committee is asked to consider and agree the approach and the indicative timetable shown, Chair. I would draw your attention to my previous point about the proposal to keep the Council's visions and values as the same. So essentially, we're seeking the views of committee in respect of the timetable for the creation of the new corporate plan and whether committee feels that the vision and values are still relevant. So, Chair, at that point, I'll pause for questions or clarity.
Thank you, Miles. At this stage, before Miles returns to the report, are there any questions on this section? Oh, I see Councillor Lloyd-Selby.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Miles. Just one question from me, please. I can see that the development of the plan includes engagement on draft wellbeing objectives. It would be helpful to understand who's actually being engaged in relation to those. Thank you.
Okay, Chair. So initially, they've been advised by ourselves, informed by the Public Service Board wellbeing objectives, but the proposal is to get a structure for the plan and to fully engage with elected members and to circulate the document for full consultation later in the process. So one thing that's clear about this whole process and timetable is we want as much input as possible, particularly from elected members to make sure that they've had their voices heard, but also as important for members of the public. So initially we're putting the structure together, but this is just us giving something to people to comment on, and we're very intent on getting as much comment and as much detail as possible over the duration of the time it takes to put the plan into its final stage.
Thank you, Miles. Any further points of clarity on that, Councillor Lloyd-Selby? No? May I ask a question, Miles?
You may, Chair.
Yeah, it's following on from engagement, and I suppose it's looking at 2.4 with a reference to the Let's Talk survey, and obviously that was a key tool that was used for engagement with citizens. are we looking at sort of, you say you're relying on the data that from the Let's Talk survey 2.4. Are we looking to learn the lessons from that Let's Talk survey in regards to, I suppose, the profile of the individuals that replied in terms of younger people, older people, and sort of how we ensure that their voices are heard? I suppose a more intergenerational approach, is that likely to sort of be one of the focuses from here on in?
Chair, I will say that along with many other senior officers, and no doubt most councillors in respect of the response, where it dealt with whether the public felt they were being listened to or not, it was very difficult to read, to be quite frank. So yes, we are going to make every effort to engage people of all generations, to make sure they have a proper say on this document. And I think it's as important to also evidence that we have reflected what's been said and we've changed the plan in response to what people have said. I think that's another thing we probably don't do. We do change documents on the basis of what people say in consultation. We're not always that clear about that we changed it because this person or that person said this. So that's one thing that we have picked up as a senior management team. It was one of the most concerning parts of that particular survey, if I'm honest, that the public feel that we don't listen to them. And that's certainly not our aim. So that's one thing we would need to make sure that we do as part of this process, as it is such an important plan.
Thank you, Miles, and that's really useful to know, especially in terms of learning lessons, and obviously take on board your consideration in terms of how the officers felt about sort of reading through that report. I've one other question on this section, and I know you talk about it later on in terms of in sort of easy read and ensuring that everyone understands sort of the terminology and the language and the tone. But talking about a corporate plan to the outside world, are there any mechanisms for changing sort of some of the language, how we phrase documents that are key to us and our everyday sort of work as councillors and to yourselves as officers, but a corporate plan in itself to citizens probably means something completely different. So will officers be able to take things like that on board? Because I think tone and language are going to be really important for this. Thank you.
Certainly, Chair, as a management team, we met with officers of the Future Generations Office a few months ago, and we were sort of testing some of our ideas for objectives with them. We've also got a clear speaking policy as a council and clear information. And one of the things that we're doing as a corporate management team is trying to make every objective easily understood, properly able to be measured and evidenced. So I'll give an example. One of the things is still in development. One of the objectives we came up with was to be the best councillor we can be. So we're talking about not always one-liners, but really distinct, clear points of objective where people could fully understand what we're looking to do. So no long descriptions that people glaze over when they're reading. This is a public-facing document. It should be able to be read and understood by the public. So it's one of our prime aims. It is covered within the report, I think, but that's certainly one of the things we're trying to achieve as a management team.
Thank you, Miles. That was really comprehensive explanation. Councillor Hennessy, you'd like to come in?
Yeah. Hi, Miles. Good report. My concern is a lot of elderly people do not have access to laptops, computers, or anything like that. If they request a hard copy to be able to read this, will we be able to provide them with it?
Chair, I don't see why not. It's not an unreasonable request, and bilingually, of course. So we must make that information available through the contact centre. So if someone wants to read it and they don't have access to the internet, then that's not an unreasonable request.
Noted. Thank you, Miles. I see no further questions, so would you like to move on to the next section?
Thank you, Chair. So paragraph 2.10 of the report explains the requirement for the council to undertake a panel performance assessment which you must legally do once every electoral cycle. So the purpose of the assessment is to provide an independent external challenge to help inform the council's improvement journey. And the PPAs are administered via the Welsh Local Government Association, who will appoint the panel and facilitate the actual process. Paragraph 2.12 details the makeup of the panel, and the councils have the opportunity to agree the panel membership to ensure its suitability. We can also appoint additional members should we see fit. The council must submit a scoping document to the WLGA, the Welsh Local Government Association, to provide an overview of the council and to outline our vision and wellbeing objectives. And work has commenced on this scoping document, which will be informed by the findings of the council's latest annual self-assessment and any recent external assessments of the council. Now, this is what we really want committee's view on, is proposed to use the panel performance assessment as an opportunity to sense check our emerging improvement plans as part of the development of the new corporate plan. So we will have the annual performance position for 2023-24, and how we then put this into the corporate plan and it effectively provides our vision for the next 5 years will be considered as part of this PPA work. And this will help us to ensure that the plan is most relevant to our forthcoming challenges and, more importantly, fits with the needs of our citizens. So the committee is asked to consider and approve the proposed scope of the council's PPA and a timetable detailed in 2.19 in the report. Chair, I put myself forward as a PPA team member for other councils, and I know lots of colleagues in other councils have done it. It's been it's the first year of doing it, so there is some learning to take place. But the WLGA are very clear. This is not a regulatory framework in the sort of manner of Estyn or the Wales Audit Office. This is an improvement document that helps challenges the council, but helps it get to where it wants to be. So we thought this is a really good opportunity for us to have this independent assessment in the autumn, when we're sort of partway through our development of the corporate plan, where members had an opportunity to comment on it, but it's still in its early stages. So essentially, we're asking committee to agree that as a point of principle, and the timetable detailed at 2.19 in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Miles. Are there any questions on this section of the report, including the proposed timetable that's at, as Miles referenced, at section underneath section 2.19? Councillor Lloyd-Selby?
I don't have a question. Just to comment, Reid, having read the national guidance that's been issued on preparing the scope for a performance, for a panel performance assessment, I think the council's decision to engage with that external scrutiny is something I would very much support. It's always useful, isn't it, to have a different perspective on what our plans, what our priorities are. We want to put the views of our residents front and centre, but we also want to learn from what's happening elsewhere in Wales. So I would absolutely commend that decision. The timetable looks reasonable to me. So yeah, very supportive of that proposal. Thank you.
Miles, would you like to comment?
Yeah, just to say that the good thing about these reviews is that officers that are selected to take part, we have to put it was like a job application, essentially. You have to put all your detail and learning and experience in the council over the number of years you've been there. And they select the correct people for what the council is looking for in terms of its journey. So it looks to me to be a really interesting learning process. And the panel I was on was various directors and chief executives from different councils. We're all really looking forward to taking part, because we're all doing things a little differently to each other, and some of us are doing it better than each other. So that's a really important point for us, to learning from this process without it being too difficult and challenging, because we've already got quite a strict regulatory framework. So this is about improvement, and it's about matching the needs of our residents to our corporate plan. So it is an interesting opportunity, and I think it'd be interesting to bring the outputs from that back to this committee so members can consider what came from it. But it's I've been involved with various assessments over the years in my career, from compulsory competitive tendering to the best value process, and some of those did not necessarily achieve the best outcomes for residents. And I think this is something that looks to me as if it has the potential to do that.
Thank you, Miles. You've just answered my question, which was around, I suppose, giving reassurance to us as councillors as well as to residents that the selection process was robust enough that that officers weren't picking their fellow best pals to give the response that they were hoping for. So to see it independent and robust, and yeah, I as Councillor Lloyd Selby said, I've sort of I'm pleased with that. Are there any other questions on this section, or can we move on to the next, which I think is around this annual self-assessment? Miles, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So paragraph 2.20 details the learning from the 2022-23 annual self-assessment and the proposed approach for 23-24. So I won't go through them all, but the review findings are detailed in paragraph 2.21 under the headings Directorate Self-Assessment, DSA, Peer Challenge, and Annual Self-Assessment Report. And the proposed new approach for the 2023-24 annual self-assessment is detailed in paragraph 2.24, along with the indicative time frame for producing and reporting the Villa Glamorgan annual self-assessment in paragraph 2.26. Paragraph 2.27 and Appendix A to the report outlines the methods how elected members in particular will be involved in key activities, including the Council's annual self-assessment. And committee is asked to consider the review findings from last year's annual self-assessment approach and approve the proposed changes for 2023-24, including the indicative time frame, Chair.
Thank you, Miles. Are there any questions on that section of the report, including the proposed timetable and, of course, Appendix A, which sets out how we as members will be engaged? Does anyone have any points or either questions or points that require clarification? Councillor Lloyd Selby?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sorry, it's me again, Miles. Just in terms of the timetable, I can see that in August 24, we're planning the engagement on the self-assessment findings with staff, public and other key stakeholders. And I'm always slightly concerned whenever I see that there are any plans to engage in August. So obviously it's a month when many staff with childcare responsibilities take leave, and members of the public often are away or busy with childcare and other responsibilities. So it's not necessarily, it never feels to me like the best time to be trying to engage on such an important area of the council's work. So just be really helpful to understand what steps we're going to take, the council is going to take to ensure that that engagement is really effective and meaningful, given the risk of that particular month.
Yes, it's a good point. And the difficulty, I guess, is there's so much happening over the year in terms of the calendar. We have to include July and August, which are the months where you do have people on holiday. One thing I would say, it is the full month of August. So hopefully we will pick up people who may be taking a 2-week break within that period. But we tried different ways of arranging the time frames, and the start of our own financial year and the regulatory assessments mean that we're crashing the summer, whichever way we try and arrange it. I think all we can try and do is make that period as long as possible. So if people are away, then at least there's a period by which they're back home in order to respond. But I'm not really sure how we get around it other than trying to make that period as long as possible. It is very difficult trying to fit all this in 12 months. You wonder whether it should be a 24-month year. You might be much better off. But that's the challenge, I think. But I'll take that. I'll certainly take that back. And we'll see if we can make that as long as possible. I think that's the best we can offer for that.
Thank you, Miles. Councillor Lloyd Selby, did you want to come back on any of those points?
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Miles. Absolutely. I totally appreciate the pressures of the timings around this. And helpful. You've acknowledged some of the challenges around having to do this engagement over the summer months. I guess it's just important that we do ensure that engagement is effective. and meaningful. And I would ask, I'm sure this will happen, Miles, but I would just ask that, you know, if there are any concerns about the level of engagement as a result of it being held in the summer, that consideration is given to whether or not that can be stretched even by, you know, a week. That we're just proactively monitoring what that engagement looks like to ensure that it's meaningful. Thanks.
Yeah, Chair, I don't disagree. I mean, one of the things that was, I read lots of social media posts, as I'm sure everyone does, and most people comment on the council positively and negatively. But when you look at the numbers of comments that came back when we did the budget consultation, a major piece of work, it's really disappointing. So somehow we need to engage better. And you know, we will do our best via all means, and if we can stretch the period to get more people involved, we certainly will.
Thank you, Miles. I have a question, and I can't see anyone else's hand up. So if you'll indulge me again, please, Miles. It follows on from that, and it's that same sort of timeline again in around August 2024, and based on previous discussions around engagement, the term itself can be quite vague. So if you could just give a little bit more explanation on sort of the engagement side of it. And I know that the appendix sets out quite detailed engagement for us as members of the council, but it's the public that are always key. And following on from Councillor Lloyd Selby's comment, is there any likelihood that you will have an indication of response rate at the midpoint of August to determine whether it is so poor that we need to consider extending that timeline for consultation, or will you not have that data available at that point?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. If we're going to consider whether we have to extend it or not, we need to know where we are, don't we, at a certain point in the process? So yes, I think we will need to know that. We will use all our fora, all our links, all our groups in order to engage. I don't have that list with me, but I don't think it would be unreasonable of the committee to ask for the details of that engagement plan. I'm sure the colleagues in the Chief Executive's office are dealing with it. I'm sure it'll be far and wide, but it would be good to show that the numbers of people and groups that we're looking to engage with and how we're doing it. I guess most of it will be via digital means, but there'll also be other means, as Councillor Hennessy has pointed out, for people who don't access computers. So I don't have the full detail of that engagement process, but I don't think it's an unreasonable question to ask. Particularly on the back of the Let's Talk survey, where we need to consult as far and wide as we can.
Thank you, Miles. Any further points or questions on that section? No? Miles, was there anything else you wanted to touch on?
Not in that section, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. I think from that report then, Mark, we've got some recommendations to make. And I think following on from that discussion, we might include one around I'm making a request from this committee for an explanation on the exact nature of how from the Chief Executive's office, Miles, what fora will be used and what processes will be used. And, you know, we assume digital, we assume sort of through established groups, but for those who can't access those groups, if we can ask how, would the committee agree to that sort of recommendation being added on? Yes, I see Councillor Lloyd Selby. Yes. Okay, thank you. Mark, I think we look at I think there are 5 recommendations. Yes.
Bear with me, Chair. There are the original report. There's also the reference which I've shared with members, which I think is on the website now.
Of course, yes.
Just in terms of that, obviously Cabinet approved certain parts, and then the main recommendation then for the scrutiny committees is obviously that for their awareness and consideration with any views being referred back to Cabinet. So obviously we got a recommendation which is more for the operational officers about the details on the process. It's just whether there are any comments to go back to committee, or if committee are happy. Other than that, recommendation for officers to note the report. So it's up to obviously yourselves if you wish any comments to go back to cabinet, or you're simply happy to note and then just have that recommendation go back for officers to action.
Are colleagues happy with that? Yes.
Oh, sorry,
sorry,
Miles.
Sorry, Chair. I wondered whether you wanted to make that point about the August arrangement with that Councillor Lloyd Selby had made, whether you want to suggest that we make sure we've got a reasonable response over the holiday period, and if not, can we extend?
Absolutely.
Sorry.
Yeah. No. It was an important point, and it was about if we can establish if we'll have the data at midpoint August to determine whether we need to extend. Yeah. Councillor Lloyd Selby, are you happy with that?
I am. Can I just clarify? Will that point be referred back to cabinet, or is that seen as an operational issue?
I'm guessing there'll be some delegation for officers in respect to that. Chair, I would need to check, but the time frame is written in months. I'm guessing we'll have some delegation to extend. It all depends how it fits in with the committee and the cabinet cycle, I guess.
What we could suggest, Chair, is that it goes back to cabinet as a general comment about possibly extending the period if the response rates are not high enough, but that also can be obviously relayed to officers as well. If committee are happy to do that, so obviously you're covering both bases then. Yeah, just to be sure that,
Are colleagues happy with that? Can I get yes, Councillor Hennessy, thank you. Councillor Lloyd Selby, thank you. Thank you. That would be useful.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, committee.
Okay. So thank you, Miles. As always, a really comprehensive report, and thanks for answering the questions and giving us some assurances too on the processes. So thank you for that. Okay. So I understand, Mark, that we don't have any items that I deem as acting chair as urgent. No?
No, Chair. Nothing for parts 1 or 2.
Okay. So I think there are no other matters arising for this meeting. So that's coming to a swift conclusion of our business for this evening. So all I am left to do is to send you a gentle reminder that our next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, the 10th of July at 6 p.m. So thanks very much. Thanks for bearing with me for acting as chair for this evening. I'm sure we want to wish Millie a speedy recovery, and I will see you all, if not very soon, but certainly next month. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.